Okay, so on the 7-string thing, I've kind of fallen in love with it. And like I said, the tuning that I've actually ended up liking is not the standard tuning with a low B string. That just really sounds flubby. At least this guitar, which is a RG, I think 7321, is a 25.5-inch scale, which is the standard scale I normally play, Fender scale. It's just too flubby for me. Possibly in something with swept frets or something with a longer scale. I actually have a 7-string on the way that has a 26.5-inch scale, so maybe it'll be less flubby on there. I also have only gone through one set of strings, which was like a 56 on the low string, so possibly with like a 60 or something like that on the low string, maybe it wouldn't be so flubby. So I have some more experimentation within the 7-string thing to do, but I've fallen in love with this tuning, which is basically a drop C tuning on the low 6 strings of the 7 strings, which is basically just D standard, and then you're doing the drop D thing, but because you're already down a whole step from standard and D standard, it's now a drop C instead of a drop D. So you're basically tuning the low E string, which is now a D, down to C, hence drop C. So demystifying that about, it's just regular tuning, down a whole step, and then drop the low string another whole step. So it's kind of your standard drop D thing, a whole step lower than normal. And what I've done is add an 8 gauge on top of that. And the strings I found so far experimenting that I like is I've actually gone from a 56 up to a 58 on the low string. It's basically just a set of 11 to 49 XLs from D'Addario, but I've chucked the 49 for the 58 gauge on the low string. And then I've added on the high side the 7th string is actually an 8 gauge tuned up to a high G. So you've now got basically a high E, essentially if we were in standard, and a high A. But because we're down a hole, it's a high G. So, that's a G and that's a G. So that's where we're at as far as what this mechanically is and how I've got it to work so far. And incidentally, it also helps if you put something before your main drive pedal along the lines of a tube screamer. I'm playing through a JHS Sweet Tea, which is essentially a Angry Charlie with a 808 style tube screamer in the front. What that does is it cuts some of the bottom end out and enhances your mids a bit, so it keeps you from being all flubby as well as far as your drive setting, which is also good for the 7-string thing and maintaining clarity. So all that babbling aside, what can you do with it? Well, you've basically got the extended low range of a dropped guitar, but you've still got enhanced high range even over a standard guitar, in my opinion. So you basically have everything in one guitar, and you really don't have to relearn much, especially if you've already played in drop D quite a bit. All you have to do is memorize the new high string. And much like on your low B, it's kind of the same deal, except you're not looking at your B to figure out what the patterns are on the new string, because it's still a double. You're looking at your A string and just repeating them on the high A string, which is actually a G here. I know, it sounds really complicated, but it's not. Anyway, what it does is it gives you a lot more range. So on the low side, of course, it's your good old drop C, which is pretty heavy sounding. But you've also got the high string now, so you can add to your pattern. Whole nother string. lot more room in your chords for adding other inflections. Anyway, if you have a 7 string and you get bored, check it out. It's a pretty neat way to set it up.